Hey, welcome. All right. This will be lecture 6.7. Let's throw this up here on dreams. And one of the cool thing about dreams, well, I mean, dreams are just cool in general, right? They're really weird. Just, we sleep, which itself is kind of weird. But then at various points where we sleep, our mind seems to become awake, sort of, except we're living in this world that's bizarre and weird. And what the heck is all that about? Wouldn't we like to know? Wouldn't we like to apply science to the study of dreams? Okay then. Well, suddenly chemistry's looking pretty simple, huh? I mean, seriously, there's what, 100 plus elements that behave in very principled ways when you combine them. So you do a few experiments, combine some different elements and chemicals and capture it all in a formula, and there you understand chemistry. Try understanding dreams. It's a lot more challenging, but that's what psychology is all about, trying to scientifically study challenging concepts. So why are dreams challenging? Well, there's a number of reasons. The first one is the person is asleep. You can't see the dream directly, obviously, like you can see a chemical directly. You could only usually get an understanding of what's in somebody's mind through their own reports, but they're not going to report anything while they're asleep. And so how do you go about doing things? The very first thing that's important for you guys to understand is that when we go to sleep, our whole brain chemistry changes. All of the not all of the neurotransmitters, but the major neurotransmitters in place. When we're awake, we're seeing acetylcholine and cortisol playing big roles. When we asleep, we have growth hormones that are out there, testosterone, and I told you in the previous lecture that sleep is not about physical repair, but now I'm going to have to backtrack on that a little bit. It is about physical repair to some extent. So it does take care of maintenance of the body, repair, growth, that sort of stuff. That's what a lot of the hormones are doing when we're sleeping. The point I should have said better before is that it's not the case that if you have a poor night's sleep, you are in a bad physical situation. It's not like night by night like that. So generally when we sleep, our body is doing that sort of maintenance. But if we miss a night or two or three of good sleep, it's not as though we physically start to fall apart. We do mentally fall apart. Cognitively, we fall apart, but not physically. But the important point that I want to make here is that what happens, and we all know this, when we wake up from a dream, that dream is there the moment we wake up, but it very quickly disappears. Why is it disappearing? Well, this is why it's disappearing. Literally, the moment you start waking up, the brain starts swapping out all of the neurotransmitters that it's using. It becomes almost a different brain. It goes to a very different place. And that dream existed in the context of that older brain. And as the brain kind of changes into its wakeful state, the dream disappears. And so that's, part of the problem. I said, well, the person's asleep. You can't ask them. Well, you could wake them up and ask them. But even then, when you wake them up from a dream, it's there right then, but they better get that information out quick because it just fades right away, as we all know. And so it's for this reason that a big part of sleep research has involved dream journals, right? So the first step almost always, if you're interested in studying dreams, is to tell this person you have to have a journal right beside your bed with the pen ready. And the moment you wake up, try to capture that dream in your mind and try to capture it in your journal. Capture what you can as it fades away. And so, what do we have here? I was in my bed at Daddy's house. I could fall asleep and was watching a show for 6-year-olds on Netflix. Every 5 minutes or so, I would set the show down, close my eyes, envision the setting of the show, and attempt to induce a lucid dream. Okay, this isn't a very good dream journal, actually. I didn't read this ahead of time. This is a journal about them trying to... So I don't know if you know about lucid dreaming. We should talk about that later. I will talk about that later. But anyway, so forget what this actual journal says. What a journal would normally have, a dream journal, is you recounting the contents of that dream. Okay, so some research just started with that. If people recount the contents of their dream, what can we learn about dreams? And we do learn some things. We learn that there's various aspects of dreams, various characteristics of dreams that are pretty standard. And so Hobson is sometimes associated with these 5 key dream characteristics. One is the illogical content. Stuff happens in dreams that defies reality and logic. And it's almost like whatever part of our brain gets worried about that normally when we see things that don't make sense. In dreams, that part of the brain seems not to be engaged. And so, so we're interacting with things that make no sense. At the end of this, I'll kind of explain why that may be the case, why there's this illogical content. But then, you see beside that the acceptance of the strangeness. So it's not just that things are weird. It's that we're not going, wow, that's weird. Wow, that's weird. We're just kind of like, oh, cool. There's a flying horse drinking a bubble tea. And we just accept it. So yeah, again, whatever part of us normally is on the lookout for oddness seems to not be playing a role here. We tend to have odd sensory experiences. I'll mention some of those in the next slide. This one shows somebody riding the blowhole of a whale or something like that, etc. Intense emotions seem to be part of dreams. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's happiness, etc. So that tends to be part of it. And of course, the difficulty remembering we just talked about. The next day when the brain chemicals swap out, these dreams dissipate. So that seems to be, some things that are generally true of dreams. When we go to the sort of odd sensory experience or the themes that we seem, here are some of the common dream themes people have. They dream of falling. Often, there's this notion that I used to hear as a kid that it's fine to dream of falling. It's if you dream of landing, that they claim that you will never wake up. If you dream of actually falling and hitting the ground, then you won't wake up. That's what I was told as a kid. I don't know how anybody knows that's true. But it is often true that when we're falling, it just feels like we're falling. Being chased, you see being chased by a monster there. I would add to that one that often that being chased involves this feeling of being really slow, really pathetic at getting away. And often that is because, again, as I mentioned, that we have some paralysis of our body going on in the dream state. And sometimes our mind sort of detects that and we feel it like a sluggishness of all of our movements in the dreams. Being naked in public, that's probably just a reflection of society, how much we go, nakedness is, it's embarrassing or whatever. And so, yeah, whatever. We worry about that. Losing teeth, I've never had that dream. Maybe you have. Flying, not really. Failing a test, absolutely. I often had a dream, and I bet you guys do too in university, of sometimes coming to a classroom and not even realizing there was supposed to be a test, and suddenly there's a test and I suck at it, or I missed a test altogether. I have a lot of those sort of worries in my dreams. But apparently these are common dream content. Some people also have what they call recurring dreams. I have a recurring weird dream. The recurring weird dream I have is for whatever reason I'm in China, and I have been in China for a while, and it's time to go home, and somehow I just can't seem to get from my hotel to the airport in time for the flight home. Things go wrong. Elevators move sideways instead of up and down. I end up in the wrong city where the airport isn't. Even if I get to the airport, I don't have my bags there, or my bags went somewhere else, or I'm too late for my flight, or I always end up missing the flight. It takes me 2 or 3 days, and I often so anyway, this is a dream that keeps coming back. I have no idea why. We'll get to that question, what do dreams mean? But yeah, you probably may have a recurring dream of your own that you experience relatively frequently. Okay. So we can know a little bit about dreams from the dream journals, and we can go from them to try to understand why dreams are the way they are, what's going on there. Now, the very first attempt to kind of work with dreams was, of course, Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud thought dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. So remember, I've told you about the cognitive unconscious, where unconscious influences are connected to things like habit and instinct. With Freud, it was a far deeper unconscious. The unconscious was up to stuff. And part of therapy was trying to get into contact with the person's unconscious. In fact, I have to give you a little bit of this Freudian context for you to understand it. So Freud often felt that a person's issues, the reason they've come to therapy, the reason they're feeling difficulties in life, that they often reflect some deep-seated psychological issue that they have. But it's often one that's so painful for them that unconscious processes have kept it from the person's awareness. It's something that they can't deal with if they were aware of it. Maybe it's being sexually abused or physically abused, or maybe it's, I think I might have talked to you about the example of the person who sees their wife having an affair and then goes blind immediately because they are not cognitively capable of sort of dealing with that in their consciousness. And so the claim is the unconscious is sometimes inhibiting these things from entering consciousness. But the therapy is all about busting that, getting those things into consciousness, because the claim is you can't go on until you figure out what that issue is and then deal with it in some appropriate way. So the problem is, and this is what all Freudian therapy is about, is that unconscious, theoretically, that bouncer that's keeping these thoughts from the conscious mind is on alert and is not going to very easily allow that information to become available. So you have to find indirect ways. And so you know of Freud's probably, what's the first word that comes to mind when I say X or Y? And so they would try to use that, just respond really quickly, first thing that comes to mind, and you try to prompt certain things. Maybe you think the uncle might have been a villain of some sort. So you're putting out certain words, but one of the words you throw out there is uncle. And you want to see if the person says, dark, scary, something like that. Yeah. So at any rate, I say this in a funny way because Freud's theories are just theories. There's no data to back them up. It's not even a theory. It's more of a story. And he tells these stories about how all these things happen. And most of us don't really believe the Freudian stories anymore. So it's always tricky to tell you about them as if they were true when I don't think they're true. So just so you know that. But it's a major part of the history of psychology. So a lot of people did believe in Freud, followed Freud, and one of the things Freud said about dreams is that they were the royal road to the unconscious. So specifically, he would, this is just a little silly comic, the bears in your dreams represent childhood fears. Can you represent the time, or remember a time when you felt unsafe? Well, there was the time when mom locked me in a room full of bears. Okay, so what's ridiculous about that is that's a literal, bears aren't just a symbol of your fear. They actually were the cause of your fear in this case. But it conflates these two things that Freud would talk about, the manifest content versus the latent content of dreams. So the manifest content is what you actually report. Like if you wrote things down in your dream journal, this is what happened in your dream. Now, Freud thought some of those things in your dreams were symbols that represented, just like he's saying that bear you're dreaming about, that represents feeling unsafe or whatnot. And so let's think about when you felt unsafe. And so often Freud thought those symbols were the unconscious sort of talking in code. And if you could decode the signals, you could actually get at, the actual unconscious issue, that latent issue. And so he would spend a lot of time asking people to tell him about tell them about their dreams, or to write their dreams out, and he would try to decode those symbols. Now, a lot of people have run with this. I found this online, a dictionary of dream symbols and what they mean. Yeah. So you can find this. You can analyze your own dreams using this. However, I will tell you that even Freud would say this is ridiculous, because Freud believed that our dreams were very personal, and symbols, what a certain symbol might mean to you, it might be different for somebody else. And so Freud, that's why he spent so much time in therapy. He felt you really had to understand the human being really well before you could do something like decode their dreams. He didn't think that for everybody, if there were feathers in their dreams, that referred to loss and failure. So at any rate, other people have kind of run with Freud's ideas and produced these things. So be it. Okay, so this is a very, Freud is now using the content of the dream to get at the psychological issue, to theoretically aid in the in the clinical process, to help this person feel better. Again, based on no evidence and based on no data. But a lot of what Freud did was that. I mean, he just thought he understood things, and he did things in a way that reflected his understanding. If scientists don't really accept the Freudian view, what's the alternative? What's going on? And the major alternative, although I'm going to show you that even this is in flux right now, is something called the activation synthesis theory of dreams. And it basically says that it's a pretty simple thing going on. It says that at night, the middle part of the brain, some of these old parts of the brain, are just causing random activation in the mind. There's just random electrical activity going on. And therefore, certain ideas, certain thoughts get randomly activated. So suddenly you might have a thought of a train, and you might have a thought of your grandmother, and you might have a thought of a guitar, and you might have a thought of a car, I don't know. And so these things are just randomly activated, but then there's part of the cortex that tries to make sense of that. And so you end up with a dream of you and your grandma riding in a car to go get some guitar for your grandma. and your grandma doesn't play guitar, but that's how your brain has found a way to put these random things together. And that's why things end up being bizarre. Okay, to give you an idea of it, here's something called the random word generator. And I'm going to jump out of here now and jump into the random word generator. Here we go. And this will allow me to just say, okay, I want to generate 5 random words. And so what we're simulating here is the brain is just asleep, and it's just sending activation to a number of random things in your brain. And so here are the random things. Boom, there we are. Misplace, story, friend, frame, abortion. Can I make them nouns? I can't really make them nouns. Okay. I'm going to generate another set and see if I can just get a set of nouns. Control, detector, Lindsay. Okay, so let's say this was there. So I don't know. So in your brain, you're the brain now. You're the part that's trying to make sense of the brain. And the first sort of thing that gets lit up is control, and then we get detector. Detector, what the heck? These are so non-concrete. Control, detector, linen, eat, slap. So I don't know. Control. You are being controlled in your dream. You suddenly feel like you're being controlled, and you notice that in your room there's a bunch of detectors that are detecting every movement you make. And so what you do is you hide under some linen that appears to be there, and you decide this is a good time to just eat some cookies. And while you're in the linen, under the linen, eating the cookies, trying to avoid the detectors, suddenly you get slapped by some unknown force. Okay. And then what happens? Well, then you get access to a little hole in the ground. You see a little hole under the ground, and you go into that. But that's not good, because there was a tragedy there, and suddenly you're seeing all these bodies and people in pain, and the weird thing is an owl lands right on top of one of the bodies and stares at you, and then shakes itself, and suddenly flour is coming from everywhere. All this flour is coming from the owl, where it flies into the air and then consolidates. I don't know. Okay, enough is enough. You get the idea. Oh no, hypnosis, that's coming for you down the road. So you get the idea. that we have these, random things that are activated and then a part of the brain that tries to put them together in some sensical way. But because these things are random, you can't really be totally sensical, right? The best you can do is this weird little story like the one I was just telling you, and that becomes the dream. Okay. Originally, there was some pretty good support for this activation synthesis dream. Just before I came on, I did what I've been encouraging you guys to do. Oh, shoot. I should have made this. Let me quickly do this. Sorry. I should have made this animation coming on. There we go. So I did a quick search, and I just did dream activation synthesis theory. And this is Google Scholar. Again, your new friend, Google Scholar, where you get real information. And I just found a bunch of papers. So if you're interested in knowing more about where things are on dreaming now, here are some papers you can look at. And one of the ones I clicked on, which is not here at all, I don't think, but is this one. It's a little further down in that list if you do the search. But I wanted to show you a more experimental approach now of what's going on with dreams. And so let's just look at the first part. In previous research, pre-sleep suggestions influence nocturnal dream content. So what they're saying, and then the research they're starting to imply here, is they present people with certain concepts before they sleep, before they go to sleep. And then they ask, do those concepts end up in their dream? Because by the activation synthesis model, if you've come into contact with something during the day, it should be more likely to be activated at night. So things that you've recently become in contact with should be more likely to be in your dreams. And so, here's the kind of study this person did. So they were looking at the distinction between whether the stuff you activated ahead of time was related to a concern the person had or not. So a concern might be like upcoming exams or something like that. So do you present them things related to things that are important in their life or not? So let's just read this. 10 students spent 4 nights in a sleep lab. An adaptation night, just to get used to the lab. A baseline night, so where they were just allowed to sleep, and we probably, got some dream data from them. And then 2 nights under suggestions to dream about either a concern-related or other topic. So they found 2 topics. One topic that was related to some concern the students had, one that was not. Concern-related suggestions influenced dream content, largely its central imagery, more than did other suggestions. Okay, so what we're seeing here is, somebody extending the work of other people. Other people have shown, hey, if you prime some ideas, if you present them during the day, they show up in the dreams. And this study is saying, yeah, especially if those things are related to something that's already on this person's mind. And so that all sort of fits with the activation synthesis, but number of transformations within dreams was uncorrelated with dream vividness, contrary to the extended activation synthesis theory. So we're getting at details here, and we haven't talked about this enough to really understand the details. So I don't want you to understand the details, but I'd like you to get the feel for the science. Basically, they're saying that theory, the extended activation synthesis theory, so somebody's already extended it, apparently it makes a prediction that the number of transformations within the dream should be correlated with how vivid the dream is. The more vivid it is, the more transformations there should be. But they said they didn't see that in their data. And so that goes against the prediction of this theory. Thus, the concern-related status of suggestions moderates... Oh my goodness. Sorry. These Apple mice can kill me sometimes. Thus, the concern-related status of suggestions moderates their effectiveness and inconsistent with the extended activation synthesis theory, but consistent with current concerns and distributed activation theories, motivational and volitional processes actively influence dream content. What all I want you to take from that is, look, we have a competition among theories now, and there's this current concerns or distributed activation theories that probably say that stuff that gets activated is not random, that the activation synthesis kind of suggested it was random, stuff randomly, but this is saying, no, it's not random. It's, things on your mind, etc. And volitional processes actively influence dream content. So yeah, things you're thinking about, those controlled acts that you want to do, they're getting into the dream content. All of this just to do a couple things. One is to let you know, yes, you can study dreams scientifically. It's challenging. So what? That's the fun part, right? And secondly, that this research is continuing, and as the tools get better, we're going to get better at doing this kind of research. And so, if this is the kind of thing you find interesting, check it out on Google Scholar. See what's out there. Maybe you want to do a thesis or something related to this. Cool. Okay, that's all I got on dreaming. For now, I wish you all sweet dreams until we talk again. All right, bye-bye.